Castro Valley. Okay, East Oakland. All right, that's where I grew up. I got to be specific about it.
Nice. Is East Oakland the same as Oakland?
It's the same, but we have a very specific culture in East Oakland.
Oh, see? I need to find out.
It's where our hip hop artists come from. You know, it's a little different.
Oh.
Honolulu, all right. Cameron Park, California, Long Beach, Milwaukee, the Poconos. Oh, a neighbor of Claire Oliver Gallery. Wonderful. Thanks. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dimitri Broxton. I'm the Senior Director of Education for Museum of the African Diaspora. And welcome to our virtual In the Artist Studio. This week, as you know, I'm sure this is why everyone is here, we are featuring Bisa Butler. Before I get into introducing the wonderful Bisa, the format of this webinar is that we'll talk, I have interview questions for Bisa that'll go on for about 40 minutes, and then we want to reserve time for your questions. As things come up for you, comments, questions, we want this to be interactive. Please feel free to chime in on the chats. If you have a question, you can also use the Q&A, and when we get to that section, we'll go through those questions one by one. Yes, and welcome to MOAD. I know that a lot of you are first timers for a MOAD program. I invite you to check out all our calendar at www.moadsf.org. This event today is co-sponsored with the wonderful Claire Oliver Gallery, where Bisa is represented. Thank you so much, Claire. We really appreciate all your help and support. Okay, I'm gonna get into Bisa's bio. So New Jersey-based artist Bisa Butler's textile portraits of African-American people are created from layers of brightly colored fabrics with a multiplicity of meanings. Butler's composite characters are inspired by historical photography. The resulting images are rendered life-sized, with viewers often engaging the subjects eye to eye. And we can see an example behind Bisa right now. Bisa says, I create portraits of people that include clues of their inner thoughts, their heritage, their actual emotions, and even their future, states Butler. I represent all of my figures with dignity and regal opulence because that is my actual perspective of humanity. I use West African wax printed fabric kente cloth and Dutch wax prints to communicate that all of my figures are of African descent and have a long and rich history behind them. I choose bright technicolor cloth to represent our skin because these colors are how African Americans refer to our complexions. Butler is a graduate of Howard University and has been represented by Claire Oliver Gallery in New York since 2017. She is the subject of 2 solo exhibitions this year, Bisa Butler Portraits at the Katona Museum of Art, which you can see online and get the catalog, and at the Art Institute of Chicago in Illinois. And you can talk about the date for that one. I understand it's probably shifting a little bit. Her work will also be featured in an exhibition at the Museum of Fine Art Boston later on this year or next. And is included in the permanent collections of many museums and institutions, including the Art Institute of Chicago, the Museum of Fine Art Boston, the Minneapolis Institute of Art, Kemper Museum of Art, the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, Mount Holyoke Museum of Art, and other important public and private collections. Bisa Butler, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And for remembering that I'm from Jersey.
Jersey, yes, yes.
Not Brooklyn, No offense to Brooklyn.
We love Brooklyn, but yes, you got to represent where you are from and where you choose to continue to live. Yes, very important.
Yeah. I mean, that's an important thing because people always think it's super cool to say that they're from Brooklyn. I'm from the Bronx. Like, no, like that would be cool, but from the burbs, so.
It's important. Place matters in who we are, what our influences are. It's important. And it's important for our places to have a living legend like you. So.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just kind of want to get into of where are you at right now?
Physically or mentally?
All of the above, physically, mentally, spiritually.
Physically, I'm in my studio right now. This is actually my sewing room. And behind me, I have like my design wall. So these pieces are not sewn on here, but you see, I can just this is my little boss, but they're just pinned on. So this is where I spend most of my time. But what I'm doing is creating a body of work that was going to go on exhibit at Expo Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
But I did get the notice yesterday that they're putting that on. It was supposed to open in September, and now they're going to open it in April 2021. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So they
so
really
that's
put that back.
way back, and it's sort of like stretched out my timeline. And I have an exhibit open right now at the Katona Museum of Art. That's in Westchester, New York, and that's like 25 pieces, and it's just sitting empty. Like, it's just heartbreaking. The work is up, beautiful pieces borrowed from collectors from all over the world. Pieces that were like, they're already on a time limit, so wherever they were borrowed from, people went to, they don't want them back now, but they will. So yeah.
That's got to be a little. I mean, I did see that the Katona has a virtual tour that you can do. There's a slideshow. There's also a catalog. Do you feel like any of that's kind of helping the exposure for the pieces?
Oh, sure, definitely. I mean, the catalog. Thank God, that they did produce that and they had it available. Like, people can click and buy it. They can go to the Katona Museum of Art and click and buy that. The virtual tours, that's all we have right now. So it's like anything that's uploaded or digital, thank God we all kind of lived in this in between digital and reality, because that's where we are. And I'm just hoping upon hope that the Katona exhibit can get like, I mean, gosh, I don't know when New York is going to open up, but if it's like July or August, like, I'll take it. I'll take what I can
get. I'm sure everyone will.
That's up at the Claire Oliver Gallery too.
Yes. I understand that was up for 10 days before the shelter-in-place orders.
Oh God, was it really only 10 days? Dimitri, don't hurt me like this.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Oh God.
I understand you had lines around the block though, so I think hundreds of thousands of people saw it. I see people in the comments were able to see it.
That was really like the culmination of 3 years of work with working with Claire Oliver, and she was renovating the gallery, and it was finally open, and she had an exhibit for Judith Schechter. She was her first exhibit, and I think that was like a month or two ahead of mine, and then I was the second one, and then it was just like, that was February 29th. It was an amazing night, a night I will never forget, and then it was over. So.
Oh, well, I'm glad people got to see it, and and I hope that your other exhibitions, like I hope the Katona, maybe the lenders will let them have it a little longer. I don't know, putting it out in the universe.
Yes, yes, let's put that out there. And I'm sure, like, whatever plans they had for it too, those are also going to be pushed back. So
exactly.
So then maybe.
Yeah. I want to go back into a little bit of your history. I'm always interested in knowing how someone decides to become an artist. What was that moment that you had where you decided that, hey, I am an artist. This is what I need to be doing for the rest of my life?
I think I always felt that way, to be honest. Since I was a little tiny girl, like, as old as I could be to have consciousness, I was always drawing and making well, we had Play-Doh, but then my mom would like do the flour and water and like let us make our own Play-Doh at home, like add a little salt in it. Definitely. I grew up in the 70s, so it was like a time where that was accepted, and I remember laying in the grass with my mom and looking up at the clouds and her asking us, like, what does that look like to you? So I started very, very young, and I felt like I was super talented. Now, I don't know if I was super talented, but I felt that way. And I got encouragement from my family members. Like I would draw something and they would always say it was really good. So I had mentioned in another interview, but I went to this school called the Children of the Rainbow School, which was,
Oh.
yeah, you could tell by the name. They were on something interesting. It was different. It was a big Victorian house, and it was all ages from 3 to, I think they went up to 8th grade, but there were no grades, and there were classrooms, but they were just rooms in the house, and the kids could go in the room that they wanted to go in for that day.
Oh, wow.
And this is as far, like, if it was raining, the kids, the lesson of the day was to take off your shoes and socks because we're all going to splash in the mud. That was what we did that day. The whole day,
wow.
not just for like a few hours. That was the day. If it was snowing, the teachers would push all the snow into like a big like hill in the backyard, and it was just sledding. We used to go out to lunch. This is like, how is a 4-year-old going out to lunch? We would walk downtown, like 5 kids. Maybe the oldest kid was like 12, so I guess that's okay, and get like ice cream and candy. But yeah, so I had an unconventional preschool life, and that really helped like foster the idea that of free thinking. Like this school was all races. This school was one in the early days had same-sex parents. This school had biracial parents, single parents. My little friend, he was from England, and he used to wear, I don't know, English boys wear those shoes that look like girl sandals.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, I remember, like, American kids being like, what the heck? Like, what is that? But that was the environment that we were raised up in. But that wasn't forever, though. That wasn't forever. My dad was a college professor, and then he became a college president. And my parents had divorced, so they had a very different philosophy. So when my dad visited the school, he was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because I had a brother who was in 8th grade, and me and my sister were just like running wild with the other hippie children. But I never forgot that time in my life and how it allowed me to have this basis for creative thought. And then after that, we went to the Chad School, which was a revolutionary Afrocentric curriculum. And the Chad School, we used to say the principles of Kwanzaa instead of the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we used to sing the Black National Anthem instead of the Star Spangled Banner. So then that was a whole nother form of like indoctrination, but positive indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to regular public school in the 3rd grade. So all that time before that, I was in these like unconventional schools. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so those first 5 were very instrumental in kind of some of the choices you've made.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also heard you kind of talk about, and as someone who is a parent who also moved away from oil painting, I'm really interested to hear your story of how, because what I understand is you were a traditional oil paint trained artist, and at some point you had this shift. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I was at Howard. I think the year was like 1994 or 5, and I was just struggling with my paintings. I'm going to show you one of my paintings.
Wow.
I know. I don't like showing my paintings. Wait, let me see if I can figure out how to do this again. Share content. Yeah.
And while you're doing that, for folks, I see a lot of questions coming through the chat box. If you could put the questions into the Q&A, and we will get to them, I promise.
Okay, and, can you see that?
Yes, yes.
So this was a typical painting. It was just from class. We had a model come in, and my professor, Al Smith, would have the model sit. I think a typical studio class was like 3 hours or so. And this is acrylic paint, but you can see the under layers in her under her cheekbone and under her chin, the neck. And I wonder who this model was. Yeah, I don't know. But that structure is what I still use today. Like, what is the underpainting? So now I'll choose like a solid color. Then I will layer different fabrics, and a lot of them will be sheer, or they might be translucent, or some might have patterns. But I'm doing that in the same way that I built up this portrait. And the reason why I switched over to fabric, it was the same professor who was like, "You're always wearing funky African fabrics." I was always wearing prints and lace, and I would be like wearing like a lace blouse and African print skirt, which is like that's not that outrageous now, but at the time it was just now it's like, yeah, and like, have you seen Erica Badu? Like, so what? But at that time it was different. And so Al like convinced me to start incorporating fabric instead of paint. Like, and that maybe that would help me get to what I wanted. And so I was just gluing on pieces. And so it was interesting, but it was good because fabric allows me to express myself a lot more than I could do with paint. I'm going to show you some of my very first pieces so that you can kind of see like from whence I came. Let's see, how about this one I did in 2000.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And you can see like I wanted to do a portrait of my grandfather, but I didn't know what my grandfather looked like. This is my father's from Ghana, my mother's from New Orleans.
Wow.
I always say New Orleans instead of saying Louisiana, because you know New Orleans has
exactly.
So it's a place unto itself. And so I wanted to do a portrait of my father's father, my grandfather, who died of appendicitis back in like 1942 or something like that. And there were no photos of him. So I looked up African men from northern Ghana and then decided to like create this portrait based on that image. And it may or may not have been exactly as successful as I wanted it to be, but it was the beginning of something new.
I mean, based on the comments that I see coming through, I think it was very successful. I'm not the only one who agrees that it's really interesting to see these early pieces. Are these also, yes. Wow, this one just blows my mind.
So this is the same imagined image of the grandfather, but this is a year later. So you start seeing like, I'm starting to kind of understand that the layers of the face, maybe I should up the contrast so that he didn't look as flat, and to sort of understand how to structure it. And I was using all my father's old dashikis with this one, and some silk that like his hat is this raw silk, and then the top of his hat is leather. But I was using all fabrics that were donated to me by my father, my mother, and then some from my grandmother.
Wow.
And
okay, then, did you start off with all fabric from your family?
I did. Like originally it was like I was in grad school and I was like, oh, you know, I had made this portrait for my grandmother and I really liked it. And then I was like, oh, I want to make more. And my mother and my grandmother were seamstresses, not by trade, just by that they love fashion and they grew up sewing. So my mom and my grandmother just gave me all their old fabrics. They're not old, but
Wow.
they had put aside and stashed. And I remember my mother taking me into the basement, and she had like big, those big drums that people ship stuff to Africa with.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and they're like, I guess 5 feet deep. She just was reaching in there and like just giving me. It was mostly like wool, silk, because she was a dressmaker. So all those fabrics that I was using were dressmakers' fabrics. And my father, I was like, Dad, you have old dashikis. And I wasn't even thinking at the time like so much like this was giving
Mhm.
history and relevance to the work. I was thinking I need an African fabric. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I wasn't savvy enough to like go out and buy it. Not yet. Like this was like really at the beginning, like as if you were to call your mom tomorrow and be like, "Do you have fabric for me?" So yeah,
That
and
is
then
incredible.
and then all the fabric that my grandmother gave me. I mean, I'm just like I think back at that time because I still have the fabric now and the legacy that they were handing off to me. Because I lost
Mhm.
both of them very shortly after that, within a couple of years. And all like it was like they were giving me what I would need to take care of myself. All these now it's been like 20 years later without them. So
Wow. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, so now these are your memories.
right,
Are you
right.
still are you still incorporating some of those fabrics into your current work?
I do. I use some.
Wow.
It depends on what it is. My mother in the 80s made like all kinds of stuff with kente. Like she had the kente tam, and like every jean jacket had like kente on the collar, like kente on the back. Like so all that kente is mine. And I use it because I like it outlived her, put it that way. And like if
Mm,
I don't use it, it's gonna outlive me too. It's just that's
that's a good
just
way to look at it.
my grandmother saved like fabrics from the 70s, African fabrics, silk fabrics. She would wrap everything in plastic. So it was like preserved. And I just feel like compelled to use it now. I don't want to leave my children with I don't know.
Giant boxes. Well, you have one going to Pratt, so you never know, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I keep trying to like push the fabric of her. Like I want her to do her own thing, but I also want to like make sure that she's
Hmm.
getting it. You know.
Yeah, some connection with that.
Yeah.
I want to know a little bit more about a couple things about. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, I've heard stories about the Beast. Can you talk a little bit
Oh.
about the Beast?
Yes. Let's see if I can wait. Let me see. This is so awkward because there's my husband.
Hey.
Oh, you know what? It's other way. Okay, here's the beast. She's here. It's kind of hard to see at this angle. There we go. But there's nothing on here being sewn. But the beast is basically takes up this whole room.
Okay,
And
so this is why it's the sewing room, literally.
yeah, this is literally my sewing room. The Beast is a machine that is on 12-foot rollers. Here, I think it's just too bright in here. There we go. Okay, see those bars there?
Wow.
So the Beast is like, I can walk and sew with her. She is a quilting machine. And quilting machines, they were originally made by, as far as I know, it was a man who made mattresses. You know how mattresses have that
Mm.
crisscross weave on it? And his wife was a quilter, and he was like, I wonder if I can adapt this for her as a hobbyist. So he made them so you don't have to sew something this thick, but how about something this thick? And
Mm-hmm.
I went and bought this last May with my dad. We went to a quilt fair, and actually I was just going to look and like see. And these things are expensive. You know, they cost about as much as a car, like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
nice car. and and all these women were there buying the quilt fair was in Pennsylvania, so the Amish were there. these little ladies, mostly over the age of 60, buying these expensive quilt machines. And I'm like, I am a professional quilter, yet I don't have one of these. And they're making their quilts because they love it or they're giving it to their family members. And my father was like, you have to invest in yourself if you're going to do this full time. And so I did, and I've been loving it ever since.
Go, Dad. Dad is brilliant. After you invested in the Beast, has your work, the scale of your work, changed as a result of that? I mean, we can see how immersive the piece behind you is, and I don't think that folks from social media can always get the sense of just the scale.
I know. Definitely, my work changed a lot because it meant that sewing regularly, you're sewing like this on a machine, you know, and you have like, the machine is this big. So you're trying to like, you can do something, but with the Beast, I can write. It's basically like an extension. You're sewing like this. So even the small motion, all the physical therapists know, like our hands have but so much strength, you know, your fingers as you're pushing, but your arms, that strength, I'm sewing like this now. So the ease in which I'm sewing is much faster, it's much stronger, it's much more fluid. And I'm all share happy today. It's just so
I
cool.
love it. Yes, I love that you have so much to share.
Yes, I have like photos of really good examples where you can see like my stitching up close. Oh, maybe Dear Mama. She might be. Or let me see if you can see this. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in, but you see the stitching there?
Oh, wow.
So this piece is called Africa, the Land of Hope for the Negro Peoples of the World. And I found this photo of this gentleman, and it said, Emmett Scott, the Liberian Commission. And that was written on the actual photo, thank God, because otherwise I wouldn't have any reference to look him up. And I decided, like, there was something very compelling about the photo. He was holding a stack of papers and he was standing, and that pose, and it was 1911 or 1914, I mean. And I thought, what is the state of Black America, or this man? Look at how he's looking down his nose at us, you know, or looking at us very critically, impeccably dressed. He's got his gloves in his hand. And so I started that's how my thought process goes. I start thinking very deeply, who is this person? What is it that him look at us like that? What is his life like that he's dressed so nicely? Like when we go out now, we're not like outfitted with our gloves on and stuff like that. So what is it about him that I'm missing? And so that's what starts like this whole interest in figuring out who he was and how can I portray him. This is the photo here. Can you see him?
Yes, yes.
So here we go. I'm going to zoom in.
It's a gorgeous photograph, but what you do with it is just next level.
The gloves. You see that he has a stack of papers, and then it becomes like an anthropology thing. What are those papers? So I looked it up. Like it says Gala Peter. It's just a chocolate brand. So I guess he was holding like a magazine, and that was the chocolate brand. He had more papers in his hand. And so I decided, you know what? He looks like a learned man. He looks like, I want to put a newspaper in his hand because I felt like somehow that was going to go better. And then I looked up what papers should be available at that time. And it was, I decided to go with Marcus Garvey because the Liberian Commission, right? So Marcus Garvey and his Back to Africa movement, I looked up which newspaper it could be, and he had the Negro World paper. And so I put that in his hands. And then his hat, I wanted that to be like a wreath, like Greek style to represent royalty.
Mm.
I wanted this circular pattern over his heart because it's almost like sonar, like to bring life to it, like his heart is beating there. The birds on his vest represent for me like he's a free man and a free thinker. And then the diamonds on his pants are like he's a man of wealth and a man of status. And when I looked up Emmett Scott later, I read that, and it was later because I was like pushing, trying to get work done, that he actually was from, now Houstonians, you all know, but I think he formed the first widely distributed African-American newspaper. Like, I just got chills. He was a janitor who worked his way up to being a reporter, who ended up working for the President of the United States. He was the Secretary for Negro Affairs for the war effort. So, like, that's that communion, like, when you're staring at something. Did he tell me he should have a newspaper, you know, or is it just context clues? Like, I don't have answers for that, but he has it. Somehow I felt like he needed to have that newspaper.
Oh my goodness, that is wild. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You know, you started to go into a little bit of the fabric, and you know, I would definitely want to know more about your fabric choice, particularly in your more recent work. I've read a few things where you kind of alluded to, you know, how the fabric has different meanings for you. I'm thinking of the portrait of Frederick Douglass, in particular, his pants. And can you talk a little bit more about, because you know, wax print is definitely something that a lot of folks identify with an African aesthetic. I think you take it to a whole other level that I don't know that most of us know about.
Well, the fabric.
I love that you have that.
Fabric, oh yeah, look, we gotta look at them because we gotta African fabric. It's very interesting how it goes. You know, the manufacturers make the fabric, and then it goes to the marketplaces. And so for us, if you haven't traveled in Africa, if you're not sure, it's like a flea market, right? Open air. And these women are selling the African fabric to their customers. And it's the customers who end up naming the fabric. Even though, you know, when it came from the factory, let's say the fabric on his vest, originally that print was made in the 1920s. But let's say it was just like a factory number, right? The women in the marketplace decided that they were going to call that a speed bird. And for them, it meant money, like money can easy come, easy go, like as soon as you get it. So it has a name, like the fabric on his arms, that's called the ABCD fabric. And that was made like in the early 19th century. It's still popular now, but especially at that time, and even now in Africa, people who can read and write, that's something to be honored and something to be proud of. So if you're wearing the ABCD fabric, that means like I can read and write. So that fabric for me, it had to go on Frederick Douglass, a man who, I think the mistress who owned him, she taught him somewhat, and then her husband like discouraged her, so she stopped. So he had to learn from children on the street, other white kids that he used to play with, and taught himself little by little how to read and write. And then he forged his own free papers, which is how he was able to, he rode a train, like he actually rode a train to freedom. I think like, I always thought about the Underground Railroad as being like safe houses, right? Like running through the woods, that kind of thing. He actually got on a train and rode right into the West Village in Manhattan and was free.
Wow.
Yeah. And the fabric on his pants, this is contemporary fabric. And it's called, this fabric is from a line called The City of Joy. And the City of Joy fabric, the interesting thing about it was designed for women who were victims of war rapes and other types of sexual torture. And the City of Joy is a place in the Congo where doctors set up for the women to have refuge. They can learn, they can get educated, they can raise their children, because a lot of times they might be ostracized from their original hometowns. You know, unfortunately, and even now, though, people who are raped is looked at like you caused this, so you should go. And this company, Belisco, they partnered with the City of Joy and said to the women, "You design the fabric, and all the proceeds will go to your refuge." And the fabric itself was to represent the pain that they went through, but not just the pain, but the successes too. So the fabric, I'm going to show you a little bit of closer image of it because it's supposed to represent all of the strife that they went through when they were suffering, and then how they were able to persevere. If you look at the bottom of his pants, it's like a tangle of vegetation and leaves and thrush. You can't barely get the light. And as you move up, you start to see more and more air, and there's flowers suddenly in there. And then at the top, you see there's clouds and there's a bird, like that represents the freedom. So this particular fabric was made for women who suffered and struggled and then persevered. And I thought, that has to go on Frederick Douglass, you know.
Wow.
And then one last note, his vest was donated to me. A woman online, a white woman, she emailed me and she said she used to work for James Porter. And James Porter, the African-American historian, in his travels in Africa, he got all this fabric and he passed. And I think his wife has since passed, and her being the assistant had the fabric. So she sent me a whole box of his fabric. So this fabric on his vest was actually bought by Mr. James Porter himself in the 1960s in Africa.
Wow. Okay. The history, you know, and I think when we see your work is beautiful, you know, there's the context of the fabric that we identify, but now that you tell the stories, it's just like the level of research that you do to, you know, to come up with your pieces, all of the stories that you put behind them and the intentionality. It's like, you are a genius.
Thank you.
This is
incredible. I could stay on this one piece. Even the fabric behind him, like the plaids. Like there's been historians who do like comparisons between African kente and the kente cloth in itself. Each type of kente is representing a different tribe or a different region in Ghana. And the plaids for the Scottish people represent the different clans. And so the color, when you're wearing a certain color, you know you're from a certain place. My father's from northern Ghana. So, okay, the kente that we're used to seeing is like bright orange and red. But the kente that my dad's people wear is mostly navy blue, black, white, bone, like very much muted, duller colors. So there's a link there. And then Frederick Douglass, being that he was actually a white man's son, his mother was an enslaved woman. The plaid, it represents part of him, but it's also part of us, like all of us here in the Americas. I don't want to say 100%, but maybe 90% of us have ancestry from people who owned us. So, and you have to own all of who you are, and you have a right to. It's in your own blood. The stitching in the background, I wanted to stitch so it looked like kente stitch. So I did like zigzag and swirls, and they're going in strips as if they're sewn together.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I see a question that just came in, and it actually does go into a question I wanted to ask. When I talk about, you know, I would love for you to talk about, how you approach the skin, because I think even on a screen, and for folks who haven't seen it in up close, it looks very painterly, and you're also using these colors. I kind of said a little bit of it in the introduction with your bio by reading a quote of yours, but how do you approach the skin? Because it's very different. It's not a single layer. I mean, I can even see with some of the other fabrics that you're using, you're also just not using it in a single layer. So how do you approach that?
I'm thinking about, it's interesting. I love these colors, first of all, but there's more to it. And I think I'm so sick of the fight in our community between light and dark, and we know that it goes very much deeper. It's probably started with, and I'm pretty sure, with who was treated better on the plantation when we were enslaved. Who gets a better meal, who gets a better place to sleep, who is treated more kindly. A lot of times that would be somebody who was a relative of the enslavers themselves, right? So they're going to look lighter, their hair is going to be different. And it trickles all the way down to now. I was a high school teacher for 13 years. I only stopped 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And I used to stop my students from putting their arms together to decide who was lighter, high school.
Oh, no.
Yes. Whole arguments about no, you're more light skinned. No, I'm more light skinned. And I was just like, I was never mean to them, but I would say, I'm not having these slave conversations. And then they'd be like,
I love it.
How dare you? But I think like that all the time. And it's in my own family. My sister and I look very much alike. We're only 11 months apart. So we're twins for a month every year. And she's light skinned and I'm dark skinned. And when we were little, adults would stop us and say to her, "You are so cute. You're beautiful." Yeah. And it wasn't just that. I mean, there would be whole kids that would just stop us and be like, "She pretty, but you not." It was there was no maybe they're talking about color. It was definitely out there. And my mother would always sit us down and talk to us about how we were both beautiful and that people were misinformed. And I think this figure itself, the one on the screen, I like that interplay of, you may not be able to tell, is this man light skin or dark skin? Is the blue a shadow or is the blue because it's dark? Is the orange and red, is that the sun on his skin or is he light? I like to confuse that whole issue because I feel like we need to stop it. It's not what makes us beautiful. And I hope that looking at my work maybe can help people confront that and help them see the beauty in this man's face, regardless if it's light or dark. And then if you get past that, then what is it that is beautiful about him? What is shining out? And what can I see in the original photo that maybe could represent his inner desires, his inner beauty, his soul? So I'm working with it, using these colors to try to express who he was, even though I only have this one photo of this gentleman and I don't know his name. I don't know where he was from. I don't know anything about him except for this photo, but I see humanity and a soul there, and I want other people to see it too.
Oh, we see it. It's stunning. And the how you get those colors, I understand. Am I correct in my understanding that this is just layers of fabric? There's no paint involved in this?
Right. It's just layers. His face is primarily cotton. A friend of mine from New Hampshire, she's actually a woman who I met online. I actually never met her. Her name is Mary Lee. She just sends me boxes full of hand-dyed cotton.
Wow.
Actually, she calls it ice-dyed. It's and the dyers and the textile artists know you get a jar and you put rubber bands on a piece of cotton and you put your dye, which is your powder, in the jar and then ice cubes. And you close the jar up And then overnight, those ice cubes melt. So these patterns are forming in the cotton. And when you take it out in the morning, then you have this beautiful, rich fabric with all these colors in it. So Mary Lee sends me this fabric, and I really love it because it has this improvisational quality to it. And I like when one color that's like bright orange bleeds into a royal blue. Like you're not usually going to combine those two colors, but it's happening within the fabric itself. So I'm using cotton, silk, velvet. I'm using still a lot of dressmakers fabrics. So that goes back to my grandmother and my mother. I use lace, I use netting, but African fabrics, I'll use whatever I can to get what I'm trying to come to. His face alone took me about maybe 15 hours. Maybe.
That's impressive.
But not all at once, so. No, maybe longer than that, because it was 2 days. So let's say 20 hours. And I'm just working on it bit by bit, adding these layers until I get to something that I feel like looks right to me.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the most of us could spend a year and we would never get anything like that. That is
no, that's wild. Not true. That's not true.
I wanna start getting into the Q&A session. So I'm gonna go through some of these questions. And I'm sorry, folks, we have so many that we're definitely not gonna get into all of them. But thank you so much for all of them. I'm gonna actually duck away myself so that Bisa can own the screen.
All right.
Let's see. So question number one that we have is how has your process evolved? And I think we kind of talked a little bit into that.
My process, how has it evolved? Originally, I was just cutting up bits of fabric to represent the planes of the face, just like a painter would. You have one flat layer, and then you add on light colors and then dark colors. And then over time, I've just been able to really zero in and cut on minor nuances. Like even with my own face, you know, there's dark and then there's dark, but then there's light and dark. So I start like breaking up the planes of the face even more. And the more nuances you get, the more you're going to sort of get to the heart of what you're trying to say about this person and what you see in them.
Wow. Let's see. So we already kind of talked about your sewing machine. Everyone loves that one. Thank you so much. Claire Oliver sent us over a video that we were able to put on the museum's social media. And I think folks can also see you doing that on your Instagram account. Let's see.
I wish I could post myself sewing, but it just takes so long that I don't think you would really. I thought about like nobody would be able to see anything. It'd be like we're watching and you just did like one line. So I don't know.
This is a question that I've seen often, and I'm really interested in this one myself. And I think, you know, we talk. I don't know did we talk about the fact that you have a waiting list? Did we talk about this, or was this before we went live with everyone?
I think that was before.
So just so folks know, I spoke to Claire, and Bisa has a waiting list. If you would like to purchase some of her work, you're gonna have to get in line. Some folks are asking. I see a few questions about this, about how one goes about acquiring some of your work, and also. You know, do you have any work that the average financially abled person could afford?
Yes. Well, I'm represented by Claire Oliver Gallery, and that gallery is in Harlem. It's very easy to find. It's claireoliver.com. And that's how you go about acquiring my work. You reach out to Claire by email or phone call, and it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for an original piece, then that's going to take like an actual phone call with her. because that's a big investment. And
Mm-hmm.
and also because the pieces are still being made, the pieces are not even available right now. All my work is sold from the show that opened on February 29th. Everything was sold out the night before it opened. So that meant that the exhibit and most of my exhibits just fun. It's just like great to meet people and talk to people. But people who want to collect my work, then they have to wait until the next exhibit or, whenever the next pieces are done. And there is a waiting list, but I don't even look at the waiting list. And Claire's not on here, but she deals with who's on the list and what exactly are they looking for and trying to, let's say if this piece suited a certain collector who wanted a African American family, then she would know to reach out to that person. Hey, Visa's finished with the piece. Are you interested? And this is the cost of it. And for the average folks, myself included, who mostly buy prints and reproductions, I have a poster that's available on Claire's website. Actually, it's not on the website. I think you have to send her an email, and then she'll send you a link where you can order the poster, and she sends it right out within a few days, I think. And the catalog is also still available at the Katona Museum of Art's website. And the catalog has I think it has 25 photos in it. And so with that, you get all of the pieces that are in the show, but they're small. The catalog's just a book with the artwork in it. And unfortunately, so I get emails from folks asking can I buy that piece? Mostly at this point, mostly by the time I've created an image, Claire has already matched it up with the person or institution that most likely will buy it. And so that would probably already be in the works.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go and I know we have over 60 questions here.
And I'm almost done. This thing is so short.
And we're almost done. I know we can literally spend all day with you. I know I can. But can you, kind of as a last, well, we have a little bit more time, but can you talk about the importance of the scale of your figures, them being life size? Why does that matter?
It matters to me because I want them. I guess it's my own selfish desire too. I said that I lost my mother and my grandmother in short succession very quickly. And anybody knows when you lose someone, and people are losing people all the time now, every day with the virus, you want a little bit of them back. And all you have is a photo. And sometimes that photo is only for you and your family. That's it. It's like they've disappeared off the face of the earth. So when I find these old black and white photos, like the one of Emmett Scott, I want them back again. And how else to do that than to bring them to be life size? How else will everybody see what I saw in him and notice his gloves and notice his spectacles that don't even have the wire around the ear? So that means he perched those things on his nose. And that's a discerning type of person. And you're not going to notice that unless it's life scale. I want them to be able to look us in the eye and be like, I'm a human or was a human being. And, my spirit is still out here and I'm still looking. I'm still watching you. And don't look down on me or pity me. Oh, this black man had a hard life. No, we have hard lives too. I don't want it to be any sort of, I feel sorry for you. But I just want to do it almost like a reintroduction from somebody from the past who is still here.
Wow, that is powerful.
Yeah.
I think another question that I see going throughout these is regarding. I don't know what that one's about. Sorry, but kind of regarding your influences. Who would you say? Which artists? I see a few Romare Bearden's thrown in there in the comments. in questions, who've been your greatest inspirations?
My artist's greatest inspirations, I'm always looking at the African American women who did it ahead of me, who like really kicked ass. Basically, Elizabeth Catlett, Alma Thomas, Lois Jones, Faith Ray Gold, like Black women who made their own path when there wasn't one. Um, Black women like Edmonia Lewis, we can go back as far as we can. And I want to be like them. I want to be able to work until I'm 90 and show up at the exhibit when I feel like it, you know, talking my regular low voice, but it's gonna be even softer because I'll be older and have people hush to hear what I'm saying. Um, I love that Elizabeth Catlett went off to the desert and like lived this adventurous, amazing life. So I mean, Romare Bearden, he's a big influence on me. Jacob Lawrence is a big influence on me. Charles White, Hale Woodruff, all the Harlem Renaissance artists, writers as well, Langston Hughes. But it's really the women who are compelling, who show me like you can have a family and you can make a living and you can make this amazing art that can be seen all around the world.
I love it. I love it. You know, I think also another connection that you have, speaking of inspiration, is the members of Afrocobra.
Oh yes.
You have a few minutes.
Yeah, they were my professors at Howard. I always say Dean Donaldson, but Jeff Donaldson, who was one of the founding members of Afrocobra out of Chicago's South Side. Those are my professors at Howard. Frank Smith. Oh goodness. Oh, why am I drawing a blank now? But yeah, my professors were hard, demanding, because they knew that we had to represent our people. And African American artists, you don't have the luxury of just like making stuff because it's pretty. You know, we had to make stuff that makes a statement and says like, we are proud, we are beautiful, this is what we stand for. Like our art has to educate. I think we're out of time, aren't we?
I think we are. Yes. Yes. I know, and I'm going through and I'm like, you have so many amazing comments in the Q&A and the chats, and I hope you get a chance to scroll through those. No, I know we don't want to go. We literally could do this all day. But Bisa, I know you've got to get back to that sewing machine.
Yes, I do. You're just calling me.
I understand that. And I want to thank you so very much for joining us today, sharing your space, sharing your talent, sharing your vision. You know, I still can't believe that I'm in the same virtual space with you right now. I'm so amazed by it.
I've been thrilled to be here. Thank you, Dimitri, and thank you to Moad, Sam Fran. Like, thank you for allowing me to be with you guys today instead of, you know, as we are. Not that I'm not mad about being with my It's so nice to be able to talk about art, and I'm so sorry that it's short. I could talk so much longer. So.
Well, we'll have to schedule something in the future. Yeah.
Yes,
I would love that.
Okay.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you. And everyone, thank you for chiming in. This conversation will live on the Museum of the African Diaspora's YouTube channel. It was also streaming on Facebook. And so I don't know how long Facebook streams last, but folks can go watch it there if you missed any of it. And thank you everyone from all around the world and all around the country. People are crying tears of joy in the comments. This program happens every single week on Wednesday, 1:00 p.m. West Coast time, 4:00 p.m. East Coast time. Please check the museum's website for more of that. And thank you, everyone. Lisa, have a beautiful day.
You too, Dimitri. Take care.
You as well. Take care.
Bye. you think?